All right.
Greetings and peace, everybody. So today I have the honor of being joined by Brother Jameson Reese, someone near and dear to my heart, a part of this journey of spiritual growth within our hearts, within our souls. And I wanted to get him on my channel to show the world who Jameson Reese is, who he is, what he stands for, what his vision for humanity is, and to get his message out there to the world and to talk about the different aspects of spiritual warfare, such as gang stalking, targeted individuals, aspect of dealing with handlers, etc. So now we'll hand the stage over to Brother Jamo Reese so he can introduce himself and we'll take it from there.
All right. My name is Jameson Reese. I'm a sort of self-styled artist. I also have a very profound interest in the arcane sciences, or what many would in popular culture know as magic with a K. Now, as a child, I always sort of had this sort of, I always wondered what the full extent or capacity we as human beings were capable of. So I was always the kind of individual who was like trying to do daredevil stuff. I was always on the edge, to see just how far, we could push things. So when I was a child, around the age of 10, I would say, I had a profound experience. I had gotten, uh, like a few days prior, I had gotten a vaccination for something. I guess they might have overloaded my system. I'm not sure what happened with that. I'm not someone who's anti-vax. It's just the particular way that they gave vaccines back then was a little different than the way they do things now. And so
Sure.
things weren't as they didn't really care as much. We'll just put it that way. So what happened was I had a sort of encounter with this blue entity in my room. Now I'm lying in bed, the room is pitch dark, and this blue entity just appears. And all of a sudden, it's like the individual's radiating light, and it sort of lights up the room. And then it starts to speak to me through its thoughts. Um, it starts to show me what it is like out in space, if you can imagine. And it starts to show me these strings, and it challenges me to try to perceive of how far I can imagine something the width of a pin stretched out, you know, within the blackness of space.
Hmm.
Now, after that experience, I don't recall how I drifted off to sleep or whether I even slept or not. But what I do recall is that, later on that day, I had started to get sick. I had a fever and I had you know, tonsils were swollen, everything. So I have no idea what occurred there. But what I did know for certain was that there are other realities than the three dimensions that we're used to. So, as a kid, I think that when I was 15, that was the age that a lot of things happened. Um, when I was 15, I think that was around the time that the Matrix came out. And this led me to question, what we think of as reality, what we think of as the fabric of reality. What if we're a part of someone else's game? This led me to ponder these things. Now, 15 would also be the age where two very profound things would occur in my life. I was watching a series on Discovery Channel where they were talking about individuals who had gotten struck by lightning. Now, they went into cases where people were debilitated for a long time and never recovered, and they went into cases where people seem to have awakened something that they never thought, they had the capacity to do. And those are extremely rare cases, but they're documented. So, somewhere in that adolescent brain, when we're kids, we try to experiment with things. I had the neat idea to take a coat hanger and jab it into a light socket, into a plug, actually. It was a power plug, that we plug things into. Um, the long story short, I was dazed, thrown across the room. The power in the house went out, and my father had to reset everything with the circuit breaker. Luckily, this house was constructed so that if anything seems overloaded, the power goes out rather than, because if it wasn't designed like that, I would have died. Um, Needless to say, later on that year, around November, I would have an encounter in which I was listening to a radio show. In New York, we used to have a radio station called 92K Rock, and they used to play techno at night on Saturday nights. I think it was with DJ Liquid Todd. And so, I used to love listening to that while, and I would drift off to sleep listening to techno and sometimes recording stuff. And so I have my radio next to me, and I'm just like drifting off to sleep. And I'm like in the top bunk because my brother and I share like we share bunks. It was like a bunk bed back then in within the room that I resided in. And I turned my head over and all of a sudden something felt wrong. And I saw a entity that looked like it was just solid black sitting in my chair at my desk. There was another entity that seemed like it was standing at attention, standing next to it. And in the far corner of the room, I saw what appeared to be something impossible. Now, in my mind, this struck me as completely impossible because I saw a figure that was so tall, m- made of solid shadow, that it was hunched over and kneeling. That kneeling down, it had to bend its head. It was literally like a giant of some sorts. When my mind processed what I was seeing, now no, there's what we call a street light right outside of my house, not far. So it illuminated the room, which at night. Um, what happened was I had blacked out. 3 months later, I think come to I was missing 3 months of time. So I would come to like a little later, and I would realize I was now on the bottom bunk. My brother was now on the top bunk, so I had to wake him up and ask, "When the hell did we change bunks?" Well, last time I remember, I was on the top bunk. He was like, "Well, we changed bunks three months ago." I looked outside. I was like, 3 months? What the hell? That doesn't make any sense. So I looked outside my window and I noticed that it was snowing. This didn't make any sense to me. So I woke up my mother and my sister, who were in the house at the time, and asked them what month it was. And I came to find out that we were in like January. So after that point, I sort of started to make peace with the fact that we have other realities. There are other things happening that we cannot explain. Now, in my particular case, I have no idea what occurred during that time, nor do I understand what could cause missing time. And in my history of battling mental illness, I would say, as well as substance addiction, I would say that no one has ever given me a answer as to what occurred. So my interest in the now occult sciences begins when I get out of the military after the age of 18. I think, yeah, it starts at the age of 19. Now, at that time, I was reindoctrinated into Christianity. My mother had forced me to go to a church with them of evangelical Christians, and I was like, okay, whatever. I'll just get into it. I was even baptized into the faith and whatnot. At some point, History Channel decides to do a special on Merlin, and they show Merlin, and they show like these warriors running out in the field, and he like waves his wand, and all of a sudden they're just like they're like knocked out. And so I'm looking at this and I'm like, yeah, right. Like that could ever happen in real life. And then my father told me something which he does not remember saying to this day. He said, "You don't know what I've seen, son." And so the first thing I decided was, okay, is this magic stuff real? Is this sorcery stuff real? You know, and I had initially gone into this with the intent on debunking it as BS. What would happen would be I would splinter away from Christianity, and I would come to have what I would call a lot of experiences with entities that I would like to call interdimensional in nature. Um, One of the first entities I would wind up dealing with would be Lucifer. And the what drove me to do this ritual was this was a ritual that I had found on the Church of Satan's website. And this particular ritual was meant to awaken sleepers of certain demons. And I didn't know what the heck a sleeper meant. I'm like, okay, so I guess by doing this, someone would be born into the world and have these attributes or something. I didn't quite grasp what I was reading. So, what they said was put like set up an altar, put all these depictions of the entity, all the sigils, put your blood and whatnot on it. And that was before this basement was finished like it is now. So you could see the staircase, you could see like the bottom of the staircase. And so I pinned up everything there with the sigils of Lucifer. And as I was going to sleep, I was like reciting the name. Next thing I know, I have a bout of sleep paralysis, except this is not like sleep paralysis as I've had, because I battled sleep paralysis all my life. Now, I have to say that I am someone who is diagnosed with sleep apnea. And oftentimes, what's called cataplexia are these bouts of sleep paralysis that might afflict someone who might have narcolepsy per se, where they will have these experiences that are so vivid and so real that they're just out of this world, and they'll feel everything. They could be torturous sometimes, or they could be pleasant. This is not what that was, because I was semi-awake. You know, I had actually woken up from sleeping, and what I saw in my field of vision was just a sort of gray field of like this gray blackness, and there was an entity staring right in my face, and the entity looked, I would say it looked like it was a male. It had like short hair. It didn't look much, well, oddly enough, it didn't look much different from me. And I would come to understand the significance of why it showed a reflection of myself. Now, accompanying this entity, I saw what appeared to be your traditional devil caricatures with like they were red, they had horns, but they were made almost entirely of like this fire. And so the entity said, give it said, and it had a very hoarse voice, and it was like, "Give me what you owe." And I was like, okay, this is painful. My body feels like it's on fire. Um, my head feels like it's about to explode. So I'm like, what can I do to make this stop? I'm like, what the heck are you talking about? So I'm thinking in my head towards this thing. What is this? What is this? And it's like, give me what you owe. So I finally said, okay, my soul. And after that, it seemed pleased, and whatever happened stopped. Now, this particular experience would lead to me exploring the infernal aspect of the divine, because my view of the divine is that, it is equal parts dark and light. Um, the entirety of It's us as human beings. We sort of create these divisions of angels versus demons, light versus dark, when in reality, angels and demons work as one whole. And it's what I would say is what many people consider the Judeo-Christian God. I always looked at as being one of a pantheon of multiple gods, because
Hmm.
that always made the most sense to me. And what people think of as the ultimate reality, I feel is the result of multiple parts acting as one whole. So we have the divine and we have the infernal, and we have the chthonic, and we also have the primordial. And these four forces all operate as a whole. So I would learn as time went by that from a cosmological perspective, that the ideas of the Kabbalah, for example, of there being like, Kether, like this ultimate Keter, as being like this ultimate reality, as being like the supernal, the head of the supernal triad and whatnot. Rather than there being an ultimate reality, I'm starting to wonder if, this, if there was never a centralized oneness to what we consider this simulation from the very beginning. Or rather, what I would say is that its nature was always multiple pieces working as a whole, in sort of like a superorganism sense, if you will, to create this simulation of reality that we experience. Um, and I use the word simulation because it's the only thing that sort of makes sense. And with the cosmological perspective, I'm open to playing around with the notion that, say this is a simulation. Say all these forces which we are within, are behind the simulation, controlling it, so to speak. One can even go as far as look at gods or divinities or whatnot as playing the characters, playing you, playing me. We're like characters in a role-playing game. And so we're going through this reality believing this is real, not realizing that the very thing playing us as us is the very thing that created the simulation itself. And I entertain the possibility that these architects of the simulation, whatever, you know, we can throw hypotheticals out there, such as they're from the future and they're trying to figure out what went wrong in their reality. Whatever the scenario may be, what if those architects of our simulation discovered by creating the simulation and playing as us that they in fact were in a simulation themselves, created by another group of architects? And this goes on ad infinitum. This is fractal. Now, fractal mathematics shows us, when we look at fractal mathematics, we come to learn that everything that exists is fractal within this universe to some level. Because the closer you get, the more you see parts that resemble parts of that whole. And the more the whole resembles, it just goes on and on and on. I mean, how far down can we go? We can go past quarks. Quarks is, I think that's in quantum physics, that's like where that's the furthest we've gone, I would say. But I mean, who knows? Where do you go after quark? Maybe you have another universe full of planets, full of all kinds of things, and that's the fractal nature of reality. So it's like we're all part of that, this, how do I say it? We're all part of this fourfold, divinity. And so each of us has that evil. We each have that demonic aspect. We each have that chthonic aspect. We each have that primordial aspect. we each have that divine or angelic aspect.
Mhm.
And so all of those operate as a whole together in unison to create the human being, the human experience, or shall I say, this perception of this human reality, which we have the privilege of either taking for granted or I would say, or exploring, depending on, what each individual, wants. Now, my background in magic is started out with chaos magic. And I've been doing this since I was, again, 19, 18, 19, that range. So it's been a little over 15 years, I think. I've had a lot of failures. I've had quite a lot of failures. I've had some successes. I've had some instances that seemed like beginner's luck, so to speak. And I've had to go back from the very beginning of where I started out after each failure and figure out, starting from scratch, what could I have done? What could I have done wrong? And I'd started to, over the years, even following other magicians, and looking at what other people within the mainstream magic community are doing, I started to see patterns in certain things. And I've started to uncover that what you're actually doing by writing a statement of intent, what you're doing, in chaos magic. All right, let me give some context to this. In chaos magic, you would write something like, I want a car, and then in chaos magic, they would traditionally, you'd cross out any letters that repeat going from left to right, and whatever letters repeated, you would condense it into like something that you would forge into your statement of intent. Now that right there is what we would call encryption. Of course, I would challenge the listener to do it backwards and start from the right to the left. Now, this is an idea that I got from looking into the Enochian system. And what I'm starting to find is that things seem to be a lot more stable, and you're able to get your intent like that, going from right to left for some reason. Um, what we call magic in and of itself, or sorcery, I believe requires two things. One, it requires you to adopt a sort of meta personality, or a sort of astral double, if you will, of yourself. You can give it a name, you can call it anything for all intents and purposes. And that will represent you in whatever intent, whatever spell you're writing. So whatever is being done, you would act as if that thing is the God which is doing the work. And the other thing you need is the capacity to create your own system of encryption. Because what sorcery really is more about is encryption than sending energy into something. Encryption takes a lot of mental energy. It takes a lot of time. And somewhere in the encrypting process, you're no longer focused on the actual intent itself. That's the whole point. If I'm drawing a pictogram of a sigil, I want a car, using the classical method of chaos magic, I'm still aware of what that thing means. It's not lost. You see? So the secret to sorcery is getting lost, or getting into a certain point where it's completely lost to you now, and it's just completely like mechanical. And there's something about that process that I believe is, the real, that's where you get to the real stuff. That's where you really start to get results. That's where you really start to see spirits and entities. Even if you have rituals that you found online that successfully summon certain entities, I would challenge the listener to take the ritual that someone wrote and find your own way to encrypt it. And then somewhere during that process, you're going to feel a presence. You're going to have a certain experience that you might not have had if you just recited the ritual as you read it. Now, what I want the viewers to, oh, forgive me for that, it was just a water bottle. What I want the viewers to understand is a lot of times these how-to books, when it comes to the occult, when it comes to magic, sorcery, and whatnot, what they're presenting you as far as a system is actually a servitor in and of itself. The very techniques that you're utilizing are a thought form in and of itself. So the way they set up each ritual is a thought form. And now you have to question as to whether they're using that thought form for good within their own practice, or whether this writer is using that thought form for nefarious purposes. Because each time you're reading the instructions and you do that within a ritual, you're strengthening that thought form. And that magician could use it for whatever they want. So this is something I started to pick up more and more as I started to advance. And this is where a lot of what I learned starts to come from listening to certain aspects of the occult as espoused by Douglas Dietrich and Peter Moon. Those gentlemen have some really, really good gems of wisdom. And one of the things that led me to where I am now was learning about, hearing about John Dee and Edward Kelly and Enochian magic. And so one of the things I noticed was that, yes, they have what they've essentially done is they've taken each letter of the alphabet and they've encrypted it into different words. And you combine those different words. For example, let's say you combine those and you cancel out repeating letters. You start to have something that's completely alien from what you originally started out as. And this has been what I suspected was the reason why Enochian magic is one of the most successful practices that you can possibly pick up. And so I had taken that insight and decided to start crafting systems of my own that would be sort of obscured, things that might be disconnected in some way, you know. So it would almost, and this almost ties into why, the British government, the MI6, had decided it would be interesting to use Aleister Crowley as a spy.
Yes.
Aleister, Aleister Crowley had done the workings in the desert where he was working with Enochian magic. John Dee was the original 007. He was the original spy for Queen Elizabeth, in which Ian Fleming based James Bond. So why is it that why is it that magic has this heavy, why is it that, well, let me rephrase this. Why is it that successful magic is intertwined within intelligence communities? Because it's also a way of transmuting, it's also a way of communicating encrypted messages. Now, I was investigating the Goetia Theurgia, which Mathers and Mathers and the rest of them had published. And I had decided to find out where they had gotten this from, and I came across the Stenographia by his name escapes me at the moment, but your listeners can look up the Stenographia. Now, in the Stenographia, he speaks about transmitting messages to people of different armies from afar, using certain spirits, using certain entities. And so this is where we start to learn that the occult was heavily used when it comes to war situations. And from this we have the term warlock or wizards and whatnot. So yeah, I'm just someone who has this real fascination for the occulted arts,
Yeah,
So,
that's brother Jamo, that's a beautiful foundation that you set up in terms of your background, who you are, what you stand for. And it gives an idea to somebody who's trying to understand who Jameson Reese is and what's his life purpose. So you're giving them a clear and perfect idea. Now I would like for you to describe the aspect of handlers, gang stalking, and targeted individuals. And once you lay the foundation for that, then I will add my thoughts to conclude on that, and then we move it from there.
all right. Well, as far as gang stalking and targeted gang stalking, when I've spoken to Douglas Dietrich on the matter, he can say that he acknowledges that Michael Aquino had some hand in that in the past. And for those who don't know, Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aquino, deceased, of course, was the man who wrote the chaplain's handbook for the military. He was the man who Douglas Dietrich actually liaisoned under, and he was the founder of the Temple of Set, who decided that, LaVey's practice of atheism was lacking something. Now, the what I understand about gang stalking is that these were randomly assigned targets, although I'm questioning as to whether they're really randomly assigned or not. What I've come to realize is a lot of times if you were to ask a person when they are gaslighting you or giving you a strange gesture, such as this one, which I see a lot, if you were to go up to the person and ask them what that means, they'll be like, "What you talking about? What you talking about?" Sometimes, they used to have a pattern of people they used as far as gang stalkers. Let's say you were someone who grew up and you got into fights a lot of times with someone within your own ethnicity, mostly guys who are taller, So you'll find that they'll keep sending these guys to sort of keep tabs on you. What I've
Yes.
noticed about the gang stalkers is that they always, before they do these gestures, either they'll look at their phones either before they're going to do the gaslighting, or they'll look at the phones after, as if they were typing in to see to send information about your response. Now, I do not know as to how conscious or how self-aware they are that they are being used for this. I'm aware that there are sources online that say that these people were told at a town hall meeting or so, or maybe the parole officer told them to tell this person and do such and such for a lighter sentence or whatnot. I don't know. I can say that there's a element to this that is spiritual warfare, and it has to do with targeting individuals who might look at things outside the box. Most people who have been stalked, I come to understand, have voiced some opinion or view that doesn't fit with the mainstream narratives or the mainstream views of spirituality or religion. They're not cookie cutter. And apparently this has to do with control as well. Now, I wouldn't I wouldn't dismiss the idea that these people might also sometimes be possessed by something they're not aware of, but I don't know.
Yes. Yeah, that's exactly right, brother Jamo. I mean, even here in my local area, they would use it was at that time when this area was under a racist police chief, and they were using the drug dealers, like you said, with the aspect of a lighter sentence, or they would say that they would look the other way when they were doing their activities, as long as in return they would do certain assignments for them. And how this gang stalking works is basically to get under your skin. It's all mental. They're going to use color coding. They'll use like a phrase that's personal to you that nobody knows when walking past you, or they'll say something. Or one instance was when I was going to the dry cleaners, this gentleman was walking by and he spit at my shoes, like this real angry look. And had I reacted to that, right down the street, there were 2 to 3 patrol cars. So if I would have reacted, they would have got me. So it's the aspect of not reacting. And that's what the gang stalking is, that you do have some kind of a purpose. You do stand out. You do have a light and magnetism about you, whether you're on the left hand path or right hand path. Like you said, it all works within that one hand, the God, devil, angels, and demons, however people perceive it. It all works within this one hand. And it's all part of the same circle, never ending in this fractal reality. So the aspect of gang stalking and targeted individuals, I noticed even in my childhood when I try to put two and two together of why did certain individuals act like that with me when I never did anything to them. So from there all the way up to my adulthood, now it makes sense that there is that internal struggle where some people see you as a threat, they recognize your soul, they recognize the love and the light that you carry, no matter what path that you walk or the gift that you possess to help humanity, help yourself. And then they kind of keep their tabs on you. And that's exactly what it is. But ultimately, it's about how you react. But like you said, everything is within that thought form. If you don't pay any mind to them, then that parasite eventually starves to death and it goes away. Whether they're using street theater, whether they're using like intimidation tactics, trying to make you react, using color coding such as red or blue, or they'll even go as far as back going into your history and find out who was the girl you liked in high school, who is your favorite teacher, and they will use those elements against you because they'll know that, oh, you'll open up to it, you'll be vulnerable to it, and that's when they'll try to get to you, to try to break your heart, to try to put you in these situations where you do meet with these individuals and they end up turning on you. But ultimately it's all to demoralize you, to demoralize your character, to put you down, to make you just go away. So, for them, it's like, yo, let's just make Sal and JMO go away so they don't go on the internet or speak about anything again, or just put them in a mode of misery. That's what they want, to destroy you. And in order to do that, how you defeat them or how to defeat gang stalking is ultimately, it never really ends. Even the concept of defeating gang stalking, quote unquote, is that you're not giving them your power. You're not letting them mess with your emotions and your mind, even with people with me. Now I speak for myself as a free individual. I don't represent any organization. People think due to my background that I wouldn't be stalked, but I'm a Muslim American, I'm Pakistani, and I'm involved in a lot of things. So they do it, and how you defeat it, it's basically it doesn't go away, but it's just like this. For you, it becomes like an everyday thing. You laugh, you smile at it, and be like, okay, I accept that this is my reality, and I understand that no matter where I go, I will see this. So I accept it, and I don't let it make me upset mentally, emotionally, or spiritually, and I keep it moving, knowing that it's all mental. No one's gonna lay a finger on you because this whole gang stalking thing is for you to just incriminate yourself. Like, that situation where the gentleman was walking by, I didn't react to him. I just kept it moving. And they didn't get nothing out of me and nothing happened. They just stood there looking stupid. So that's what it is. When you give somebody that implement, like when you open the door and the black-eyed children are there, if you don't invite them in and you don't react, just shut the door. Don't give them consent. They can't do nothing to you. So it's simple as that. That's how you defeat gang stalking. It doesn't go away, but you just don't give them your power, don't react to it. Just laugh at them like I do every day in the morning. Just wave at them, laugh, enjoy your life. I was in the concept of, like, traveling around different cities, how you and I, myself, brother JMO, it doesn't make a difference. As long as you stand in your truth, you know who you are, what you stand for, no one in this realm can touch you. It's all about reaction and the mental mind game. That's how you defeat these elements in America.
It seems to me that that reaction is meant to sort of reinforce control of the simulation over people rather than allowing us to explore our own power over the simulation. Because if we reach a point where we become proficient at being able to shape the simulation, being able to reshape reality in accordance to what one is to reflect oneself, which is almost like the goal of alchemy or the goal of many occult paths. If you reach that point, you're out of their control. And
Exactly.
so what I've also found is that in at some point they start to sophisticate the script. Once they realize they're not getting a reaction from simpletons, just doing whatever, they'll start to throw different people into the mix, people who you might see only once, and you'll be like, this person is odd, or you'll see this person on the boat every time you go to Manhattan. It doesn't matter if you leave at 2 in the afternoon. It doesn't matter if you leave at 7 o'clock at night. That person's always there when
Yeah,
you happen to be on conveniently. And they could be reading a newspaper or something, but they're always within eyesight to let you know that you have a detail about you and they're watching you.
of course. That's exactly how it is, and that's what it is. You just got to, like I said, maintain that power, and that's what the aspect of defeating the whole mind game is. Like you acknowledge that they're there, they acknowledge that you're there, they know who you are, what you stand for, and how you're a threat to the simulation or their web of control, whether you're of the left or right hand. Every individual possesses their own unique quality. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. You're here for a purpose. Myself from the right hand, Brother Jamo from the left hand, together we operate in the same hand. And this is an understanding that only few can understand. I come from the Sufi background, the Islamic mysticism, so I understand that when we say Allah, God is the only reality, that means that everything is within, doesn't happen without his permission, whether it's good or bad. So when you accept and acknowledge it, both sides of the equation, then you understand, okay, this is why this is happening for this reason, for this purpose, and for this basically conclusion from the way that the whole situation is being set up. Like you explained about the ferry boat. You'll be individuals that they'll have all the space inside the boat, but they'll come sit exactly right next to you. Or there'll be this guy with the newspaper or the girls dancing in front of you and all of that stuff. So it's all there. I mean, even because they'll know what your habits are, what is it that you desire. That's how deeply in the spiritual warfare game they'll look into your past, including what I stated about past love interests or past people that you looked up to. Anything or anyone can be used against you. That's the concept of an agent. When Neo was running around in the Matrix, anything or anyone around him could turn into an agent to come after him. That's what exactly what the concept of gang stalking is, that spiritual warfare and targeted individual. But again, if myself and Brother Jameson can see this thing for what it is and realize that if you don't give it your power, yes, it won't go away, but if you don't give it your power, then you continue to live your life normally, doing what you're doing. I'm still here, Jamo's still here, we're still doing what we're doing. It's all basically within the mind and the heart. And that's exactly what it is. Even with myself at the park, what I see, like with the people that are sitting there walking around, people I never seen before. But I know what the whole situation is, and I don't feed into it. I look at them, I smile, I keep walking, I do my thing, I do my pull-ups, I feed the birds, and I come home. That's it. And that's basically the whole situation. That it's all basically to pierce through your veil, which is to get you paranoid, to make you go crazy, like what Brother Douglas had stated also, that it's all a big game just to make you go crazy. If you don't give them what they want, then what purpose do they serve? Then eventually it just, you kind of get used to it, and at the same time, they kind of start backing away slowly because they know, like, it's not worth it for them either.
And also, when it comes to handlers, they'll use people who you respect, a lot. They'll use people who you would hold in high esteem.
Yeah.
And what would happen would be that person at first, they would learn about what path you're on, and
Mm,
then they will co-opt that path as their own path. And they will try to twist it to make you follow the path in the way that they see it as a means of keeping you under control. What
mm-hmm.
it Now what it is a means of trying to hinder you hinder people from evolving, hinder us from making even deeper discoveries and insights. And so whatever it is, it's like it's a system, in order to you have to go through a certain ordeal in order to learn something else. You have to pass a certain ordeal or initiation to gain more knowledge and insight. And so that's what I sort of see it as, that this, the gang stalking is a sort of spiritual initiation to see, whether you're going to become more sophisticated and evolve, or whether you're going to self-destruct and blow up and wind up dissolving.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting you mentioned that because I guess only the strong survive, and I guess even the system is trying to see that out of these individuals that possess a high spiritual level, which one of them is going to go to the next level or get stronger from the adversity or the challenges that we put them through. That makes complete sense. And in terms of the handlers, brother JMO, even the aspects of people that you know within your family, even individuals within your family could be your handlers, your friends, people that you look up to, anyone or anything, like the concept of an agent, but you got to know how to identify it. If there's anywhere where, let's say, you're trying to avoid bad habits or you're trying to learn, be in a better position in life, and anywhere where you see criticism or hindrance of any kind, just know that that individual or he or she has been placed to keep you at a certain spot in life. And that's what it's kind of a red flag that you should always stand out for, that what is it that they want to keep me in a mundane routine, or if I can't let's say converse on different topics with them, there's a certain boundary that I got to keep within them. There's a lot of things you got to watch out for, and I know that's a lot of those things stood out with you with your previous handler that you were dealing with, and all those things that stood out to you, and eventually they will show you their true colors. When somebody tells you who they are, brother JMO, you best believe it, because that's basically
Oh,
they're letting you
yes.
know.
Well, that's the thing about the handlers, is they always give themselves away in subtle ways, and they're never. And the odd thing about it is they're oftentimes not consciously aware they're doing it.
Yeah, just like the gang stalking thing.
Yeah, and it's like sometimes you'll encounter, handlers, like there was a woman who was purporting herself to be someone who lived in New York for a long time, who was stalking me on my phone.
Yeah.
And it turns out that I suspected she was trying to handle me by getting me to do certain things or send her certain things. And they reached the point where I had identified her be, based on the last name that she held. I used that against her. And after that, contact became minimum.
Yeah, exactly. Once you see through their charade, they basically back away from you. I've had those experiences with different elements that I had dealt with in this country, and it just basically was an education for me. I'm grateful because if I didn't know those things, I wouldn't be able to speak on this subject. Because ultimately, brother JMO, experience is our best teacher. We could read all the books we want, listen to all the lectures we want, but if we don't personally experience it, do it, and like the aspect of the initiation, the spiritual warfare, how you stand out from the crowd, then you won't know. And when you are able to identify these elements like you did with that woman, then they'll know, okay, now he knows how to deal with me. It's the same aspects of the you becoming a master magician and exploring these different arts and crafts that are out there. You are on that path of real self-improvement, not what these fake gurus and new age teachers are out here doing, especially exploiting. There was a girl recently I told that never let any man manipulate you, exploit you, or use you in any way, especially because she's into the spiritual stuff, especially this new age stuff. And it's like the story you covered the other day about the sex cult, how they were using
Yes,
a
yes, the
woman within
Nexium
that
cult.
cult.
Yes.
So
And
it's all, you're right. I agree.
these people would oftentimes not even realize what. Oftentimes, these people are just they're so entranced what happens is they get these the spiritual gurus, these fake gurus are able to get their followers into a trance. And the
Mm.
way they do it is by mixing elements of truth with exaggerations.
Mm-hmm.
If you mix the truth and exaggerations, the person's not going to be able to tell that it's a lie, nor will they be able to tell which is the lie if they do suspect something's off.
Yes,
And
that's
so
right.
they're able to use that charisma, charm, and a sort of elitism, and they call to people who have never been a part of, people who've always felt, rejected, or people who might be suffering from a low self-esteem.
Mm.
They pull them in like poop pulls in flies, and then, and then they just use them. They use them up,
Exactly.
and at the end, these people would have been better off if they never met some of these fake gurus out there.
That's exactly right. But, ultimately, the way that I see this reality, Brother JMO set up, is that everything in your life is coordinated in a way, both good and bad things, to make you into the individual who you are and to serve the purpose that you're meant to serve in this lifetime or simulation, you can say. Now, I would also like to ask you, in your opinion, how would you, in your experience and in your shoes, defeat the aspects of gang stalking, targeted individuals, and handlers? And please take all the time you need to explain it in depth from your side.
Well, I like to think humor. Honestly, enough. Honestly, if someone walks down the street and they're like, you could just be like, you chuckle to yourself and keep going. Them, and at some point that disempowers them. You turn
Yes.
it into a game because they're a part of a thought form that they're not aware of. They're feeding a design that they don't even know the schematic of, and they don't know who made that design. They don't even realize that whoever came up with that schematic does not hold their interest, or rather sees them as something that is disposable.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. And it's like what you say about the aspect of the white and black races in America. And it's how like a lot of the Asians are being attacked by both races. And
Yes.
that's what the unfortunate part that I've noticed, like when they were using a lot of these African American drug dealers in this area against other minorities, against Muslim Americans, against other brown skinned folk. And on top of that, there was another hierarchy that was using them against it. And I'm like thinking, for
Yes.
what? For what? What? It shouldn't be like this. And I agree with your when you feel that resentment and you feel that anger towards both races.
Well, it's more or less, rather than a resentment, it's a disappointment,
I
because
agree.
it's a realization that what we're dealing with is something that transcends whatever condition was placed on you. Your
Mm,
gender, your ethnicity, the region you grew up in. These are conditions.
mm.
Not to be looked at in a negative sense, not to be looked at in a positive sense. They're just, you are what you are based on that. But those don't define who you really are. They don't define the unseen aspects of you. They don't define the mind. They don't define the spirit. They don't define your cognition, how you see things. They don't define your own individual expression. And this is the problem. We're within this country, we are seeing such a polarizing race schematic that it there's no way this country can possibly survive the next 10, 20 years as it is, unless
Yeah, that's right.
unless a major rooting out and weeding out of these divisive elements is made. That's the only thing that can ensure the continuance of this experiment that we call the United States of America. And I will say that there's a reason why I call it an experiment, and that what this nation is and how it formed is something I say Hasn't been done before. It's unique, very unique. And, it behooves people to stop looking at people as groups, as here's a black man, there's a white woman, there's an Asian person, and see them as this individual. Who is this individual? What does this individual represent in their personal reality? What is their personal expression? What is the root of their soul? What is it that makes them tick? What is it that makes them happy? What is it that makes them great? What brings out the best and worst of them? The problem is we've focused so little on individuality, and we in this culture of America, it's focused so much on seeing controlling the masses to do things as masses that people have forgotten what it is to express themselves individually. And
I
when they do,
agree.
and the people who we think of as individuals who are creating culture, they're not really creating culture or expressing themselves individually. They're being used as tools to steer other people into following them in this sort of consumer mind, you know, economic conglomerate that they want to put together to just reap profits off of everybody.
Yeah, yeah, that's one thing I noticed in America, Brother JMO, from a Eastern mindset and perspective, that they always want to keep one against the other. They don't want people to come in unison, in unity. And all the systems here, if it's not about making somebody money or making somebody a profit, then it's not going to be there. Yeah, you do have these different things out there that are helping people, but ultimately the majority of the system is a is just there to exploit people, to exploit, to keep one against the other. And you're right, there is a crossroads that the people of this country are at right now. And within these next 10 years, they do have to make a decision. I mean, recently I saw in the news that there was like a heavily armed group in Boston somewhere, and they got the authorities just took them down while we were speaking, and it happened today. And these kind of incidents are on the rise, where we're having Asians being attacked, these different mass shootings going on all over the country. People are mentally losing it, and I feel that energy in the Philadelphia area. I know you feel it in New York City. You could
Oh
just
yeah.
feel that energy that something is not right, and there is a balance and an order out of chaos and disorder out of chaos that's going to happen within this next 10 years. And I ask you, like, what are your predictions for these next 10 years for America and the world from what you've been able to observe from your studies?
Things are going to get faster and faster. The events are going to start piling up on one another so fast that people aren't going to be able to have seen it coming. Um, there was a time when in 2020, everyone was like, that was 2020, man. I survived 2020. It's 2021, and we're seeing more happening in one day crammed together than happened within 2020. This is going to keep going. The thing is, while we're here fighting each other, what are we doing about the climate? What are we doing about, storms are getting more and more intense. Places are becoming less and less livable for things are becoming more and more hostile to living on the surface of the earth
Mm-hmm.
because of what we let go, because of this mass consumerism, because of greed, because of the desire to just reap everything and not care about restraint, not think about tomorrow, not plan, not create an architecture for the future. And it's for this reason that the human race as a whole is at a crossroads. Now, as a species, yes, oftentimes I do meet it with scorn. I do speak of it as if it's something horrible. But in all honesty, the reason why I do that is because there's so much potential. There's so much you as a species, as an individual can do. So if you're to take anything away from me today, your audience, I want you to reflect on what it is you have the power to do. What can you do to unlock something on your own within you?
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, brother Jameson, and please, if there's anybody that out there that took the time to listen to brother Jamo, please think about what he's teaching you, and I would like to ask him to give his concluding thoughts and to give his YouTube channel link. I know he has a YouTube channel, and I would like his concluding thoughts on today's teachings and what he would like to leave the viewers with.
Well, what I'd like to leave the viewers with is that oftentimes you have to start to learn how to not only think critically, but read in between the lines. Because if you're being shown something and you're being shown that this is the way, then there's something else you're not being shown that might be more effective than that.
Yes, yes.
Experiment, experiment, and experiment. That's all I could say. As for
Thank
my own YouTube, right now, the YouTube still has me with some extremely long name. So what I'll do is I'll probably have to send you the link.
Yes, please. What I will do is I'll put the for the viewers that are listening, please go to Brother Jameson Reese's channel, subscribe to him, give him the same support that you've given me, and watch all of his videos that are there. His content and his views are suppressed by the enemy because he's speaking the truth. So please go and support him, subscribe to him, and he has my permission. When I put this on my channel, he has my consent to download and mirror the video on his channel as well.
Well, right now all I have is music on it. These are musical projects that are dedicated to certain entities within the infernal divine hierarchy. I am uncertain as to whether I want to pursue being able to, convey certain things as I'm conveying to you and your audience right now on my channel. I'm thinking it might be best to make a separate channel for that in the future time.
Sure, anytime, Brother Jamo. You're welcome to use this as you see fit.
Much thanks, Brother Salman.
Thank you, brother. Much love, and thank you again for everything.